And now I'm absolutely delighted to invite uh, good friend and colleague Joe Jenkins, who is from the Children's Society, to talk to us about structure and the impact that structure can have on the supporter experience. So thank you very much, Joe. Over to you.
Thank you, Richard,
Fine. Okay.
and
Cool.
good afternoon, everyone. Really, really good to be with you. Sorry, I spend my life in Teams at the moment, so Zoom is a new world. But really good to be with you this afternoon. I'm Joe Jenkins. I support the Children's Society in achieving social impact, and I'll explain a little more in a moment of what that means. But if you're not familiar with the charity, we've been around for a while. We were born in 1881, so just over 140 years, and in that lifetime, we've done lots of work with some of the most vulnerable children and young people in the UK. And we currently work predominantly with young people going through adolescence, so 10 to 18-year-olds, and predominantly teenagers, because teenagers are still children. And that's where we know in the decade ahead we can have the most impact. And I'm going to talk to you this afternoon about why I believe if we're going to create amazing experiences for our supporters in a way that joins up and creates positive social change, we need to be joined up in how we work within our organisations, and that means looking at how our operating models work and how we organise ourselves in ways that achieve that. So hope that's what you're here for. We went through a not dissimilar exercise to Macmillan. It was great to hear in that last session how they've challenged themselves to think differently about how they create change in the world. And back in 2020, we went through something not dissimilar at the Children's Society, when we took a step back to remind ourselves, why do we exist? Do we have a right to exist? What are we here for? What's the day we won't be needed anymore? And that's the day when we live in a society that's built for all children. So every child, regardless of their background, where they start in life, have the same potential to be their whole selves, their best selves, and realize their potential. And so that's what we're here, and that's what we're fighting for, a society built for all children. And we said in the decade ahead, what's the big scary gulp moment for us that will get us a huge step closer? And when we looked at everything we'd been hearing from young people for the decade that had gone before us, what we saw was that year after year after year, more and more young people were struggling with their mental health, with their well-being, with their hopes for the future. And we didn't want to see another decade. We didn't want to get to 2030 and have another 10 years in which more and more young people are finding life harder and harder. And so we want to turn that around. And so we set ourselves a big ambition by 2030 to overturn that damaging decline in children's well-being. So by 2030, children's lives are getting better, not harder, year after year. And to do that, we'll be guided by our values and the people around us, because we won't do it on our own. We're going to need to build a vibrant community and movement of people joining forces with us. And so to arrive at that goal and that vision, we had a big conversation where we spoke to young people, we spoke to partners and critical friends, and we spoke to people within the organisation, our staff and volunteers. And not only did we realise that that was where our goal needed to focus, but we also asked ourselves, what would we need to do in order to be able to achieve that goal? So we asked people, what are we like when we're at our best? And whoever we spoke to, were about 800 people around the UK, project workers, shop workers, people working in marketing and fundraising and finance, all the different bits of the organisation. Everyone said the same two things. When they feel like they're making direct impact for young people, it's the most energising, motivated, inspiring part of their day. And when they feel like they're working alongside colleagues on the same outcomes. So in other words, when it feels like we're all putting in the same direction, when we're working on the same agenda to achieve the same outcomes that we can see impact young people's lives, that's when we feel like we're at our best. That's when we do our best work. And so as we set our strategy, we decided it was going to be really important to embed that way of thinking and working together into how we organise and how we deliver all of our strategy. So alongside those first four big strategic choices, we made a fifth that we felt was just as crucial, which is that we need to work as one. So we need to be a star organisation, even over star teams. So not just individual excellence in departments and functions, but collectively able to achieve more than we could on our own. And so that led us to think about, how do we organise and set ourselves up to succeed? So my bit of the organisation that I've helped to build, we just call social impact. And what we recognized is that in order to achieve that big, ambitious goal to turn around children's well-being, there were two big things in the world of social impact that would need to be true. So we would need to change the way in which people in society think about young people, understand what's going on in their lives, their care and concern to do something about it, and to feel motivated to take action and join with us, and to grow the number of people getting involved with the Children's Society. And so social impact brings together all of those traditional external facing functions. It's marketing, brand, comms, it's fundraising, supporter engagement, business development, institutional fundraising, campaigning, advocacy, influencing, all of those things, and looking at how do you get that all to work together as effectively as possible. And so we identified a number of things that we felt we needed to tackle in order to be able to be more than the sum of our parts. These, I'm sure, aren't familiar for any other charity in the UK, but this was the situation we found ourselves in at the Children's Society. When we looked at all those things like marketing, fundraising, campaigning together, we found that in our existing structure and model, that often our teams were being set up to compete against each other. They all had plans that pointed at the strategy, but they often felt like they were competing for resources, for the use of channel, for priority over each other. And it was becoming more and more blurry who was responsible for what. Digital in particular was kind of, is it in this team or this team? Is it fundraising? Is it marketing? And the way in which we were organised meant that it was really hard to commit to shared outcomes because everybody was committed to their own individual team outcomes. And having that organising in teams and functions made it much more hard to be agile in the way that Macmillan described, because we had to try and take people out of their team, which was where they felt their commitment lay. And it was all organised in what you might think of as a very traditional bureaucratic hierarchy. That's your traditional kind of top-down structure where you have directors and directorates and departments and teams, and everyone sort of sits in their individual box. And this resulted in decisions sitting in teams rather than sitting at the point where we needed to have impact. It meant that expertise was often guarded by teams because it was threatening for other people to do stuff that you feel like is your brief. And teams would have their own little cultures and act as cliques. And if you're in this team, you're not in that team, and so on. And this held back the ability for people to progress outside of their team. The only way was vertically up within your function, which also made it hard for us to learn from each other's work. So we recognized that we needed to do something a bit different. And the summary, I heard this quote over and over again. People said, well, we're at our best when we're all working in the same direction, but it feels like when that happens, that's in spite of the organization rather than because that's how the organization is set up to deliver. So we set out to say, well, what if we organize ourselves differently? What if there was a different way of doing it that made integration and collaboration something that was an inherent part of the operating model? And the reason we think that's so important is because we're trying to move ourselves in our strategy from the kind of model on my left hand side, so where you've got the charity is doing the good work, supporters give you stuff, and then you do it for beneficiaries, to something that's much more of a movement model, where we say, well, the challenge we're trying to address is this decline in children's well-being, and we need to build a movement to achieve that. And in that movement are young people, are people who volunteer their time, their money, their voice. There are professionals from different backgrounds, and we need to collectively work together. And the reality is that if we're not joined up internally, it's a lot harder to be able to join up an active movement externally, to be one entity all heading in the same direction. And the reason we were encountering these problems wasn't because people didn't want to work well together. It's because it was how we were set up. If you design yourself in a way in which you have directorates, departments, teams, every team has its own vision and its own objectives and its own budget and its own activities, it's quite hard for that to all add up again, because everyone is set up to work on their own individual bits of the pie, and we wanted everyone to work on the same outcomes. So we looked externally to see how different types of organisation were innovating their business models. Were we alone in thinking that we might be able to do things differently? And of course, we found that across sectors, everyone is grappling really with these same problems. If you've not seen this picture before, it's from McKinsey. It's actually from 2017. And it was quite a landmark piece of recognising there is a different way of business models being orientated away from that bureaucratic hierarchy where it's top down, everyone in their different silos, to a much more fluid network in which you bring people together to solve problems, bringing different expertise together. So the arrow that takes us down shows that kind of general direction of travel for many organizations, from that bureaucratic hierarchy to having more, still having departments, but also running more integrated projects, to starting to move away from the department model to saying, well, we have functions, but actually we use agile to get the best out of those functions, to a model that moves beyond functions to just think about what's the knowledge and skill sets and expertise that we need available, and we weight where we put our effort into delivery, and that delivery is in an agile way, all the way through to completely holacratic organic network, so where everything is moving in a very, very fluid a way that's constantly responding to the external environment. And so the Children's Society, we look to see, well, how far can we get on this journey from where we are today? And that brings us then to the model that we have been implementing over the past 18 months or so. And what you can see is that we move to a knowledge-based model. And what that means is that we have moved away, so our social impact area that I help support, rather than us having a marketing department, a fundraising department, a campaigning department, what we've done is identify what are the skill sets that we need, and we organize those around common sets of knowledge, which we call knowledge groups. And we use our knowledge groups as communities of practice where we can build up our expertise. That's where people learn, it's where they get professional and pastoral support and so on. And then we do the work in activity groups. So that's where stuff gets done. That's where we do the delivery, that's where performance happens, that's where we achieve impact. And then we bring the learning from the doing back into the knowledge group so that it becomes organizational learning. And then we can then take that into the next activity we need to deliver. And how that's delivered is against the strategy. And so we use our strategy to provide clarity on what does success look like? Where are we trying to get to? What are we prioritizing and focusing on? What resources do we have available? And how do we make sure that the different activities we're working on are all adding up to more than some of their parts? So just to give you a sense of what that looks like in more structural detail. So this is our equivalent of a structure chart. It's intended to be upside down. So rather than it being kind of the senior people at the top and then everybody fits into departments underneath, leaders sit underneath and hold up the organization. We're there to support and create the environment for people to be able to do their best work. And within social impact, the knowledge groups describe the areas of skill and expertise that we need available to us to be able to achieve those outcomes, to change the way society thinks and acts around young people and grow support for the Children's Society. And then our activity groups are dynamic and changing around the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. Some of them might be very, very short term. They might be reacting to a moment. Some of them might be sustained programs over time, but they have the same principle, which is we're clear what outcome they're trying to achieve against our strategy, and we bring together the knowledge and skills that are needed for that particular piece of work, however long it may go on for. And the benefits of us working in this way are multiple. And so they organizing in this way really allows us to realize that potential being more than some of our parts, because everything comes back from impact and outcomes. So what's the collective results or outcomes we're trying to achieve, and then who do we need to involve in it at any given time to achieve those results, which allows Join Up to be more embedded into the ways in which we plan our work. And it allows us to be responsive because we're not fixed into a lockdown structure from a moment in time. We're able to continually adapt, which also helps build our resilience in quite a fast moving external environment, because we can respond to the priorities that deliver the impact in the environment we're in. And it does really value knowledge and expertise. So although what we're trying to do is get the best of collaboration, which is bringing different skill sets together, which means you still need to invest in different skill sets, but you need to deploy that in a way that achieves those shared outcomes, which is helping us to start to try and strip away some of that bureaucracy and hierarchy so that things just feel lighter and easier, and particularly create a model that is dependent on the empowerment of people within the organization. So this is a model that allows people to really build, connect themselves to the impact that we're trying to achieve. And then we devolve decision making as much as possible to allow people to get really good at the areas of expertise they want to develop, and then to put that into the activity because they're clear what success looks like, which also opens up more progression pathways, because there are more ways for people to be able to deploy their skills and learn from others with talent as well. So that's a quick overview of obviously a lot more kind of complex thinking. And I think it's really important that I stress that this is a work in progress. And so we're learning as we go. The idea of working in this way is it's a learning model. It's not a fixed model where you put a blueprint in and say it only works in one way. So we're constantly testing and adapting. And I think it's important to emphasize too that we're not getting everything right. Some things don't work as well. We're having to find new ways of doing lots of things, which means that often when we're doing things for the first time, it's that bit harder as we're working out how does it work in this new model. So although we're seeing the benefits already and we're already committed to the model, it will keep adapting and changing over time. And that's really inherent to how we think it will be effective for us. So that's a whistle-stop tour. I'm really happy after today, if anyone does just want to follow up. Part of the reason for sharing this is because we want to learn from others too. So we want to put out there our learning and hear from others so that we can keep feeding off each other. So really happy to do that. But Richard, I'll hand back to you now for any questions.
Thanks very much, Joe. We had we'd like to run a quick poll, actually. So thank you for putting forward that what could be a really complex model, but you brought it across so simply, that from the hierarchical bureaucratic to the open networks, those 5 stages. We're just going to put a poll to the audience to ask 2 questions. Where are you now on that journey, and where do you think you could? Where's your target? So if you've got some knowledge groups, where do other charities think they're going to be? So, Kay, I don't know if you could launch that poll, please.
Yeah,
see where everybody's where they think they are at the moment. That's the first question. So, be honest, it's all anonymous, and you're not going to be telling any secrets or giving any secrets away. And then, yeah, we'll gather those results where you want to be in the future.
Thank you very much, Richard. Okay, so this is the technical part of the afternoon. So that should have popped up in front of you now as a multiple choice question. Brilliant. So please go ahead, and as Richard said, this is totally anonymous. No one's going to see your answer except you, and we'll all be able to have a look at what we've answered as a group in just a few seconds, which I'm really looking forward to. So far, the answer to the first one, what's leading, is the second answer, departmental model with some integrated projects. That's where most of our pollsters are answering. So there we are, the results there. And then just behind that, we've got 20%. That silo, that hierarchy that Joe was talking about, is coming in there, followed closely behind with the mix of functions and a slightly more agile model. But then at the moment, much smaller group of people answering that a fully agile model or a fully networked model is where they're at the moment. But then, as you can see, if you look down to that second question, it's quite interesting to see actually the movement is towards that much more agile project, that knowledge-based model that Joe's just been talking about. And actually, we have a fully 0% of attendees who said they want to be working towards a hierarchical model to achieve their mission. We're all smiling on this call and thinking that probably sounds about right. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, Kay. Thank you, audience. Thank you, everybody, for contributing there. I think that's a really interesting shift. I think I'll kind of, there's lots to learn from that. So thank you, Joe. Thank you for your time. Really pleased that you could join us, and I hope you're joining us for the panel discussion at the end.